Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
V here, co-host of the Sleeping Barber Podcast. Thanks for tuning into our PostPod discussion of our recent episode, Ad Fraud, The Real Cost, featuring Dr. Fou. Mark and I discuss various topics, including incentives drive the problem, not so much technology, the addiction to cheap CPMs and fast metrics, and so much more. And while I have you, feel free to like, comment, and share, and even get in touch with us. We're always looking for ways to make this show better. Now, on with the PostPod.
We're back for the PostPod.
But
How you doing, buddy?
I'm pretty good, V. It's been that kind of a week. It's a little bit of a circus.
It has been that kind of week.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. It has been. Not gonna lie.
We're doing the PostPod for, speaking of not lying, for Dr. Fou's episode, which was super interesting.
Yeah.
Funny when I catch myself hearing things that I just been trying to edit out, like saying super all the time.
Right. It's like, oh, that word.
I say like a lot, and I got to get that out of my vocabulary. Anyway, Dr. Fou.
Yeah.
So many things to talk about there.
It's one of those, you have a moment in your career where you spend in a specific discipline, and digital, for those that may not know, I've spent the majority of my career on the digital side of things. And when you get an opportunity to talk to someone that is so well versed in the discipline and makes things so simple to follow, I can't help just to be like in awe. Like, I have to say, I genuinely love that conversation with Dr. Fou. And I'm not going to say we talk about things that maybe I wasn't already aware of, but I think he did shed some light on some really, really core topics that at the end of the day, sometimes we just turn a blind eye to, and we just accept things. And that's where I think this was a great episode for us to remind ourselves, you know what? There's a bigger responsibility on our shoulders.
100%. Totally. The first thing that I wanted to ask you about was the incentivization around ad fraud. Yeah. It never occurred to me. Like, I just think about ad fraud and it's something that happens and you have to live with. But I never thought about it being an incentives problem. So what was your take on that?
Well, I think it goes back down to what the advertisers expect. Advertisers expect volume. They expect results. They want to be able to go back to, their executive senior leadership team to say, no, what this investment worked. And the way I can measure it is by these metrics. So when the advertisers really push in that direction and they're trying to push efficiency, scale, frequency, it's forcing these platforms or the entire industry to likely overinflate what the actual outcomes are. And that leads to fraud. It leads to misinterpreted reporting, the audience expansion networks, which we talked a lot about. The only reason those things are there is to expand reach. That's it. But that audience network is likely living in a server farm somewhere.
Funny, I just hit run on a campaign this week, and it was on LinkedIn. And I was looking, it was hard to find how to turn audience expansion network off.
Oh yeah, they buried that.
It was really interesting. It's like, do you want an accelerated or a regular campaign? Yeah. And it was really hard to undo it. I was like, come on.
Come on, guys.
And then I saw all these numbers of as it was going through, and I forgot actually because it wasn't available as I was going through the checkout process. But then later when I saw some of the results coming in, it was on LinkedIn or on the network, and the results for on network was insanely high. I don't, tens of thousands of impressions within the first seconds. Yeah, and then maybe a dozen or so on LinkedIn, and then I'm like, well, I don't know. All of a sudden I'm like, oh right, I got to turn that off. But at first, I'm like, well, that's really good. Look at how cheap that is. I just had this conversation.
I really like this. Yeah. And it's easy for you to go and defend, right? It's like, no, I put this on, I set it up in the platform. Here's the audiences I'm targeting. Here's the reach I'm getting. Done. It's a $1 CPM. Who doesn't love you with that?
Look at how much better I've made our spend. Yeah.
Yeah. You look at premium inventory. Let's just pick on YouTube Select. Those CPMs out of the platform are usually $30 to $35. But that's the top 10% of creators on the platform that those ads are being targeted against for consumers that are viewing that content. Immediately, that's going to cost you a lot more in that space. Yeah. But it's a premium audience. Yeah. That's where I think we have to be more critical of our targeting and the way we set up these campaigns in the platforms.
Yeah, totally. There's also, I remember way back when there's an experience that we both lived through where there's people that took over the reporting of what we were doing. And they
Yes.
and so by
Yes. I know
taking
exactly
over
what
the
you're talking about.
reporting, they ended up taking over
Yeah.
the strategy of what we're trying to
Yes.
do, because they were influencing at the
Yes.
executive level everything that was happening,
Yep.
because they were able to show data behind the things they were doing,
Yeah.
and then steering the data and shaping the data
Yeah.
to fit their version of what good was. And not to say that
Totally.
it wasn't, but it was definitely a different approach. And some of it was good and some of it wasn't good. But I think Meta and Facebook or Facebook, Google, all of it is kind of doing the same thing. Like they're shaping our
Yeah.
approach because they're showing the data.
Well, let's not forget, once the cookies started getting deprecated, what happened? All these platforms started saying, you know what? You need to look into MMMs. They never used to be for MMMs, ever. And now all of a sudden it's a thing, right? And it's because they're having difficulty measuring a lot of this as well. So from my perspective is you have to make sure, especially when we're looking at the reporting side of things, you have to be careful how you're reporting and what you're reporting. And I hate the whole, like, it depends in our industry that we have, but honestly, not every campaign is created equal. All impressions are not equal. So you have to be really sound and set a foundation of what you want to expect or the outcome of the campaign. Set it up in the way that allows you to drive the highest efficiency, but at a cost that you can defend. I've started not talking about CPMs because I'm looking at cart starts. Like, how many of these audiences have actually done something like add to cart to show an action, an intent? Now, the conversion may not be there. That could be up to other things. The flow is very difficult digitally. It could be they're not ready to purchase. But if I'm saying that this audience, I was able to showcase this number of cart starts potentially year over year, one could argue that I'm leading the horse to water. And there's other factors that are potentially impacting us to convert.
It's interesting though, because then even at that, there's a reporting component to it with how you approach things. And I think that's really interesting the way you're reporting on that now too with cart starts. But let's say an example, magazines, right? Like you get, we know contextual targeting is more effective than some of the stuff that's available online. You know, the behavioral targeting, the demographic targeting and all that. And we'll talk more about that. But because you don't have data spitting back at you from magazines, it takes longer to give you that cart start information and provide correlation. So then you're also sitting in a position where you're naturally, and I think this is where the Facebook, Google stuff is leading you into more of the platforms that at least can show that, because you want to be able to report as soon as you can. And there's an expectation you have to report as soon as you can. So rather than being right, it's just that you have the data. You know what I mean?
Yep. That's a great point. You launch a campaign on Monday, they want to know how it's performing on Friday. At the very least, or you're already late. So you're going to try to source as much information as you can when we know the life cycle and the cycle of campaigns from start to finish. They take time to ramp up.
I wanted to ask you also about the fraud as an industry, not as an accident comment. I know Dr. Fou had mentioned, I think he said something like it's a $300 billion pot of gold sitting on the side of the road. And it's really that easy to steal from it. So what's your take on that?
Well, if you remember this, but like bots are evolving so much, they're behaving like humans, you know, they're browsing swing sets and spraying, they're looking at shopping carts, and basically all that is doing, those behaviors are being more and more difficult to pick up on the backside. I mean, when I think about that 300 billion pot of gold, is like, man, I want in on that.
Yeah, I know.
Just skim some off the top there. No one knows. No one's going to know. Have you seen some of the videos that showcase like click farms and things like that, where they have they have a wall of like mobile devices? It's incredible to see. And you can see how this is, if it's a 300 billion pot of gold, people are going to find ways to game it, right? And that for me, it becomes like the biggest opportunity from a marketer's perspective, is like, how do we ensure that our dollars are actually working? But it's why the traditional media channels still work today.
You know, there's a couple of things that popped in my mind as you said that. I got to watch some of those videos, but one was there's performance artists somewhere in the UK that had took something like, let's call 400 phones, turned them all on, put them on a wagon, and then went to the middle of a bridge and just stopped and just hung out. And because they're all feeding data back to Google and Google Maps, it ended up creating the perception of a traffic jam. And so everybody avoided that bridge. And there's video of him
It's
just sitting there
genius.
by himself during rush hour on a bridge with a wagon.
Yeah.
So just because you have data doesn't mean a whole lot. Like it doesn't necessarily mean the thing you think it means. Is the one point that I get from that.
No, absolutely. And if you think about it like this, we keep saying like marketers are the ones that are closest to the consumer, right? You have to inform a lot of the actions that you take from a day-to-day perspective, from a campaign, creative, whatever, and do the best that you can to inform the why you're doing something specific for that set audience. And if you're not taking the time to educate your leadership, this is where a lot of the misconceptions continue to exist. It's very easy for someone to say, hey, your traffic is down year over year by X.
Yeah.
If all things are created equal, that is a very important stat. But what did you run last year at the same time specifically? Did you have Audience Expansion Network on? Did you not have it? And because of these subtle nuances, people can misinterpret what they're seeing. And I'm telling you, leadership is going to look at the 30,000 foot view. They'll always say, are you sending enough traffic to the website? It looks like you're down year over year. The first thing is volume. Freddie used to always say that. We're not getting volume, right? And then it goes down this cascading, the waterfall effect. So traffic, then cart starts, then conversion rates. Then you're looking at, well, say all of it is positive, there's still no conversion. Now you're looking at bounce rates. Like, well, maybe that's the quality of traffic isn't good enough because we were trying to say, well, our bounce rate was 90% this time around. Last year was only 70%. Whatever the case may be. And I think for me is like without constantly educating on this evolving landscape, you can get caught offside and you won't know what to say.
Yeah. And I think you end up saying the thing that because you're pressured to say it, you just give a number, right? Like, I have the data. So there, I win, you lose.
This is what I've come to know.
It's funny. I was talking to Mats Rohn yesterday from Sweden. Yeah. I had never heard this expression or term before, but the soccer goalie paradox. So football goalie paradox. And I had never heard of it, but the way he described it to me, and I hope I'm not butchering it, is that, when there's a goalie and making a penalty or he's set up for saving up for a penalty.
Trying to save a penalty.
So a lot of times they make a decision to go left or right before the ball's even kicked. And the success rate of that is something like 1 in 7. And they know through studies that if the goalie just waits and reacts to which way the player is going to kick the ball, their success rate goes up to like 1 in 3. But they often will just make a guess before, no matter what. Even though they know the odds are worse, they'll just make a guess. And part of the reason for that, in the way he was explaining to me, is that it's seen as indecision. So rather than reacting, you're still going to, your success rate, if you just did that, is still 1 in 3. So you're going to lose 2 out of 3 times. But you lose 6 out of 7 times if you just guess right away. But you have more confidence in being able to say, well, I made a choice. I made a decision. I did something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I feel like that's such an interesting, I got to learn more about this paradox, but I think it's a lot of times the things that we're being asked to do is make a decision, tell us the answer, what's going on. Because if you have indecision, it seems to me in boardrooms, like people love confidence. And if there's any sign of weakness,
I was just going to say that,
or indecision, they're going to pounce on it.
Exactly. I love what you just said there. You can wait to react, but people that move quicker are the ones that just go and do. And then this was the hypothesis. This is what we went to try to do. It didn't work out. We pivoted. We went in this direction. Organizations will always prioritize speed, always. And I think those that are on maybe naturally have more of this like defensive state, where you're taking some time, you're trying to assess the situation, they likely get labeled as not moving quick enough, just get out there and try. So that for me is a really important, how do you navigate internal politics maybe? But like you have to move with speed. And technically, because it's digital, we can move with speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were for you, he came out with a whole list of like practical defenses for marketers that they can be, things that they could be doing. What stuck out for you when he was kind of going through
audience
all that?
Expansion networks, just turning that off as a starting point is such a practical tip. I know.
So
but
simple.
like I was saying, it was not obvious how to do that in the setup process. Like it was defaulted to turn on in LinkedIn's case, which I remember it being defaulted to be turned off before. But then there's also like this, like as I was saying, there's a somewhat of a an emotional incentive. I'm like, oh, look at that dopamine hit or whatever. Look at that. Like I've got all this reach all of a sudden. This is amazing. Look how cheap that is. This is a great platform. And I'm like, no.
Wait.
Yeah. So there's that.
What
I think is like, so
yeah.
It's such an important thing to think about and an easy thing to do, but I think there's actually massive downstream implications to that.
Yeah. But didn't he say 90% of fraud is in the
networks,
audience expanding it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, second one. What else was there?
I think there was something he had mentioned. I can't remember the exact quote, but there was a thing around like, don't trust the data that people are feeding you as a starting point. I'm like, yeah. But again, like it's hard to do that. And I think part of the challenge that
it is,
and we talked about, the acceptance of him and the things he's been saying over years. He had mentioned that he's been saying the same kinds of things for 15, 20 years. Yeah. 15 years. And it wasn't until recently that really a lot of people are starting to pay attention to what he's talking about. And I feel like that's the same kind of thing within an organization where you can say these things like turn off audience expansion, and we're not going to pay attention to the data that's in Facebook and Google, or put it in content and start from a point of mistrust. But then you have that problem like we were just talking about. Well, show me the data. I'm like, yeah, I want to show you the data, but I'm not sure how good it is. What do you mean it's not good? And there's a whole conversation that, I don't know, do you want to die on that hill or not? Like, it's just one of those things. You're the digital guy. You don't believe in anything digital. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's just that I don't know that what we're seeing is the real thing.
And let's not forget, sometimes you have two different data sets. You have the platform data, and then a lot of organizations, they have other platforms that they leverage, like the Adobes of the world, Datorama, where everything gets funneled in. And those things aren't 100% the same either, right? Like you have UTMs for Google, you have CIDs for Adobe. So sometimes you can't even reconcile what you're seeing in platform, because that's the easiest information you can pull is what coming from the platform itself. The business probably use a different tool to report on everything, right? And when those two things don't work together, not communicating together, it's very easy to say on the Adobe dashboard, I've seen no conversions, but Facebook on this side is telling me, oh no, you're crushing it. And which of the two is it then?
Well, yeah. And then the other thing is, and it's not exactly something he said, but I kind of feel like, because you had mentioned this, because the data is coming at us so readily, it's flowing, right? It's in real time on the digital side of things, but the business data isn't. So I think if we at least were to say, let's pair our reporting to the pace of the business data, it gives you a little bit more time as a starting point, because then you're saying, well, let's root ourselves in what the business is getting information on, and knowing that there's going to be volatility, noise, like even in a stock market on a day to day or in an hour to hour. Yeah. But what we're looking for is trends over time, and let's decide what that amount of time is. Yeah. And then we'll try and merge what we're getting on our side with the information that's coming from the actual cash register, and figure out what is actually happening.
Yeah. I agree with that. Still very difficult to do, to get that kind of alignment, especially when the business is expecting like almost real time pulse of how things are operating. But again, but that's where you have to come back to the over communication, the why. The reason why I'm asking us to review this every month as a whole is because of this. It's the reconciliation exercise that I need more time to give you better insights.
Yeah. And there's And like a lot of this relates back to like a philosophy of advertising. Like, how do you think advertising works? Which is also one of those things that's invisible that most people never really think about. But and if you think about it as sales done over media, and you put money in the top of the Plinko machine and it comes out the bottom. Ding, 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 like we'll create demand and we'll get and then all of a sudden, maybe this actually happened to me this week too. We're behind on some ticket sales, and I'm like trying to do everything I can to force people to buy more tickets, and they're not buying tickets. And I know that within the last 72 hours of an event is when we usually get the most number of tickets sold. And so there's incentives you can do, like pricing changes and early bird pricing and all that kind of stuff, which I've been doing, but it's still not it's still not doing much. And so as much as I want that to change, does not mean through just advertising and media and newsletters and all that kind of stuff that's going to change the outcome.
Totally.
If things like a teacher strike are keeping people from wanting to go out because they have to take care of their kids, you know what I mean? Like there's so many factors that get into this, that if we just try and use just the data right in front of us without putting it into context, it's really problematic.
Augustine, if you're still listening, thank you so much for your time. It was such an incredible conversation. I personally got a lot out of it. I know, Mark, you did as well. I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it as well.
Awesome. Well, and with that, thanks for keeping us in your ears.
Yeah, stay sharp, everybody. Well, you brought it up last time.
But I think it sounds good. It sounds good coming out of your mouth. All right.
I'll take it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.